Remember, I talked about how Western propaganda is shaping our minds. Well, which is the purpose of propaganda anyway. But it's shaping our minds in a way that it will lead us to war ultimately. It is made for us to slowly and without realizing forget the beliefs that we had from the past traditionally post World War II: democracy, freedom, belief in the institutions, belief in order based in democracy, and the mixing of different opinions and different knowledges, respect for knowledge and science. And with the recent waves of propaganda, we are abandoning this stance, and it saddens me. But I'm not gonna make any judgment now. I just picked one of the a very preeminent propagandist from the West in the case of the Ukrainian war. His name is Jake Broe, and he is interviewed in the channel Decoding Geopolitics with Dominic Presl. And I'm just gonna react to it. We're gonna see it, but please bear with me to the end. This is gonna be a rather long one. I mean, the video itself is about, let me check, it's 41 minutes, and plus the interruptions that I will be making, can be over an hour. So without any further ado, let's plow through this shit. Not once more. I know the sentence is from Peter Joseph. And, I don't know, Jack Fresco, I think. Okay, bear with me, please.
Russian military doctrine. They can only use nuclear weapons if, the integrity of the state is being attacked or compromised. And at the moment, Putin has made himself indistinguishable from the states. Ukraine will win when there's an economic or political collapse inside of Russia. We don't know when that date will occur, but when it starts to happen, things are going to move very fast.
So it's just a bit that they start to tease the
If Donald
viewer.
Trump is elected in November, he will pull the United States out of NATO.
First of all, we are over 2 years into this war, and he got back the first narrative, which was Russia will crumble very soon. It's not very soon now, but it will crumble. We don't know how. So this is a preparation for the mindset that you just gotta be patient, wait, that Russia will crumble on itself.
He won't take office until like January 20th, but the second he takes office, he's going to tell the Pentagon, stop providing intelligence, stop providing training, stop providing support. It doesn't matter if Congress allocated funds. If Donald Trump becomes commander-in-chief of the military, he says this week, he's going to purge all the top generals, replace them with people loyal to him who will do whatever he says in violation of federal law and the Constitution. Donald Trump is a dictator. He wants to be a dictator. And the second he gets into office, the first thing he's going to do is kill Ukraine.
This is a conversation with Jake Broe. Jake served as the Nuclear and Missile Operations Officer.
So that was the teaser, and you can see immediately the content of this guy and the lines he works with. And so let's dive into it.
In the US Air Force, and today he runs one of the largest YouTube channels on the war in Ukraine, providing daily commentary and analysis. In this conversation, we talked about why Jake is sure that if Donald Trump becomes the US president, he will leave NATO, the incompetence of the Russian military, or what will the end of Putin's regime look like. Thank you to everyone who supports this podcast on Patreon. And now, enjoy the conversation. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So I think most people who are listening to this
and the second he gets into office, the first thing he's going to do is kill Ukraine.
This is a conversation with Jake Broe. Jake served as the Nuclear and Missile Operations Officer in the US Air Force, and today he runs one of the largest YouTube channels on the war in Ukraine, providing daily commentary and analysis. In this conversation, we talked about why Jake is sure that if Donald Trump becomes the US president, he will leave NATO, the incompetence of the Russian military, or what will the end of Putin's regime look like. Thank you to everyone who supports this podcast on Patreon. And now, enjoy the conversation. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, I think most people who are listening to this right now probably know you as, one of the most popular online commentators on the war in Ukraine, if I can put it that way. And I definitely want to talk about that. But before we get to that, you do have quite an interesting background that I think I would like to talk about as well, because you served as a nuclear and missile operations officer in the US Air Force. And to me, that's a position that I imagine as you sitting in a bunker somewhere deep underground with your hand on a big red button waiting for a call to come to start a nuclear war. And I think that would be a good way to start, if you could maybe correct me in my imagination of what your job was and talk a little bit about your background in the military. And then how did you get to doing what you do now, which is basically running one of the largest platforms that informs people about the war. That's
Okay, the big first assumption of the conversation is a big platform that informs people about the war. And of information, it has very little, and you will see why. It is propaganda. And when you start by claiming that this biggest platform that will inform, I'll let you decide for yourself.
out there.
So I served 6 years as a nuclear missile operations officer. I was a launch officer for the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile system. That's the land leg of the nuclear triad for the United States and their nuclear forces. I was stationed in Minot, North Dakota. North Dakota is pretty cold, pretty far north. It's along the Canadian border. And while living in Minot, it's a relatively small town. I was looking for something to do, a new hobby to pick up. I was watching finance and investing videos to better understand how to manage my paycheck.
What a cliche. Anyway.
And I watched a video from Graham Stephan saying how to get your first 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I just took it as a personal challenge. This was back in early 2019.
I gotta watch that video too. I'm really struggling with those views. Anyway.
So I started a YouTube channel just to entertain myself, to challenge myself. And I was making 2 or 3 videos a week while doing my regular job in the Air Force. I enjoyed it. I didn't have any expectations that I would ever hit 100,000 subscribers or anything crazy like I'm doing now. But I did get to a point after doing it for about 2 years where I thought, what if I could get out of the military and just do YouTube, do this full time?
Look, one just does not does this plan, right? You have a steady career and you get out to be a YouTuber. It's obvious that the role that he's playing on YouTube is what's benefiting him. It's not his skills of communication, which are I'm not tearing them apart, but you have to see that you have excellent people informing you about the war in Ukraine, except that the narrative is not a Western one. So automatically their numbers will dwindle, and we have several examples of people who've been demonetized, and then the last step, they've been kicked out of YouTube because of reporting some inconvenient truths in Ukraine. It's not the case of this guy, so he's pretty successful. I know some more like him who are pretty successful. The numbers are big on YouTube. And if you compare both works, you just see that it's not because of the communication skills of these guys, but it's because of the content that it's helped being promoted. And this is my true belief. You can disagree, and please let me know in the comments.
So I decided to separate from the Air Force. This was February of 2022. I officially separated the same week that Russia launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
What a great opportunity of business. A war starting. And what do you see? A business opportunity. I know many other YouTubers saw this. I know the war in Ukraine is actually earning the dinners and lunches of many YouTubers, but that shouldn't be the point. I've talked about this in the past. You gotta be, if you wanna do, if you wanna be true to the information, you cannot look at the numbers and just follow the numbers. But look what the guy says next.
At the time, I was talking about finance and investing topics, but I made like this one-off video, just given my background, and this was the #1 news story in the world. That video got like 3 times my normal views. The algorithm rewards you, when you get a spike in viewership, you think,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I should talk about that again. So I spent like 2 months alternating between the topics, but eventually my channel doubled in size and I realized more people were watching me for news updates than for finance updates. So I eventually just committed to this path. And I mean, I've been doing it 2.5 years now, and I've probably made close to 500 videos in support of Ukraine.
So you see that this guy just said it all. Videos in support of Ukraine. So it's not about information. It's about support. You're already taking one side. So you will never explain. You will never, if that's your mission, you will never inform your audience. You'll just give them the confirmation biases. That's it. That's it.
Do you ever miss the military? Because I imagine this is probably as different of a career as it could possibly be from what you were doing before.
I think for a lot of U.S. service members who separate, they'll probably give the same answer I'm about to give you. But I miss the people. I miss the structure. I don't miss the job. The job as a launch officer was very difficult. I would deploy to the field either for 36 hours or 7 days at a time. And the way you described it is pretty accurate. You're just sitting underground in we call it a capsule. But yeah, you're just sitting there waiting for an order from the president to launch, and then you've got keys and switches. So the work was difficult.
Very difficult. Very difficult job. Just sit tight.
I didn't want to do, like, I physically didn't want to do the job anymore, staying up all night. But yeah, the people and the structure and the benefits.
He's not staying up all 7 days. He sleeps. I mean, he's just there. So, and the probability of happening, it's low. It is low, fortunately. Still, it's been increasing, but it is still low. And you just have to sit there. Just take your stuff with you, and you get entertained. You can read. You can do a lot of other stuff. So I don't know what he complains about. Maybe a shovel and a pickaxe should suit him better. I don't want to be mean.
Yeah, I really appreciated my time in the U.S. Air Force.
Of course, he appreciated his time. I mean, it's not a difficult life. He's just there, and if time comes, he starts a nuclear war. I mean, he looks pretty. This guy looks pretty. How would I say? The type of the very kind guy and the very even sociable. But I think this kind of people. I mean, I think he is evil.
Moving to what you're doing now, we sometimes hear that people in the West, in Europe, and in the US, as the time goes on, lose interest or maybe getting a bit tired with the war. Do you feel that from your position is the case?
For most Americans, they've already made up their minds. They either think Russia is the aggressor, Ukraine is the victim, and Ukraine should be supported, or some crazy 20% thinks Russia's the good guys and they're just trying to defend themselves against an aggressive NATO. There's no new information that needs to be presented after 2.5 years where people are going to change their mind.
You see the way he put the people who stand for Russia in this matter. Just some 20 crazy people, 20% of crazy people. He just dismisses them like that, who think that Russia is trying to defend itself against NATO. Yeah, because that's exactly what's happening. And you gotta be. This is the kind of guy that gives you this. I mean, this guy, it fits perfectly in the box of this narrative that forgets history, forgets all the analysis in depth, and just goes with the dog whistles. You know what the dog whistles are, right? The dog whistles is like these keywords that just they don't make you think, they just make you drool or make you react instantaneously when you hear Putin, when you hear Russia, and this kind of things. You associate immediately other words like dictatorship and oppression.
But I think emotionally, people can't stay invested every single day, comparable to how Ukrainians have to. Maybe Ukraine's immediate neighbors, they have to. This is their land, their territory, they're being attacked. They have to remain engaged every day, unfortunately. But, 5,000 kilometers away here in the United States, you can get along just fine not paying attention to the war every single day. So the average American,
Similar to any other wars that the United States are sponsoring around the world, don't you think? You see, again, this guy with this kind of benevolent look, condescendent look, he looks at you and says, "Oh, I understand that people cannot be emotionally involved every day, like the Ukrainians have, and the Palestinians, by the way, because these guys always fail to see the big policy of the West and why all these wars are happening. It's not only the war in Ukraine, of course. That's their main project now.
American is focused on other world events, other issues, local issues. But if you do ask them, what's your thoughts on Vladimir Putin? Most people are going to have a negative opinion, but they're not looking for new information 2.5 years into this war.
See, he said it himself. I don't need to debunk this guy. People, yeah, most of them have a negative opinion. I wonder why. I wonder why most people have a negative opinion about Vladimir Putin. I mean, that's what propaganda is for. And they don't need any new information. I mean, the guy just debunked the people that he is with. You see? So, I mean, let's continue.
If you look back now at the over 2 years, what are some of the things that surprised you the most in sort of a big reflection of what we've seen so far, and that you perhaps did not expect would happen the way they did?
This for me is like one of the best parts.
I guess two things, and they're both related. One, that the Russian military so horribly underperformed, given their size and their advantages and their prestige. I mean, the opposite side of Russia underperforming is Western intelligence failures about how overestimated the Russian military was.
Yeah. Oof. It's a lot to unpack here. I'll try to be brief. I'm sorry. So, I knew the guy was going to this second-rate, third-rate army about the Russian army. And at the same time, he says, of course, West has also failed in the intelligence side because they were like fearing the Russian army. Look, it's not everyone knew Exactly. Of course, not everything was expectable as it happened, because it never does. In every war, there is novelty. But the failure, for example, on the part of the secret services, of the intelligence, is just, I mean, of course you have to demonize. Do you recall the intelligence on Saddam Hussein? Do you recall the intelligence on Afghanistan, on Gaddafi? It's all, I mean, they demonize and they make the guy seem like much bigger than he was. I mean, in the case of Iraq, it was really, really, really. I mean, I remember that in '91, the first one, they painted Iraq like the new Hitler. Exact same playbook as they're using now with Russia, but with Iraq. So that's not really a failure. They knew what they were up about. They knew what they were doing. They knew what the Russians were doing. They knew the Russian capabilities. And they knew Ukrainian capabilities as well, because they were training them. They were much more actively preparing for war than Russia.
The United States intelligence apparatus was telling President Biden, if Russia invades, it'll last 3 days. We should send in the helicopters and get President Zelensky and his family out, because the Ukrainians have no chance of defending the capital city of Kyiv.
Bullshit. Propaganda. They had the 500,000 army almost in place. I mean, what the hell is he talking about? Of course, there were moments where things were a little bit unexpected. Maybe they did not expect Russians maybe to do what they did. I mean, there are several variables that you can include in measuring this. But thinking that Russia would take Ukraine, a country of 40 million people of that size, in 3 days. Come on. Come on.
Russia will take it. That was the consensus amongst all Western intelligence agencies. And they got it wrong, horribly wrong. So yes, the failure of Western intelligence agencies to just comprehend the level of incompetence and corruption from the Russian military.
This is amazing. I mean, this is very good material. You have to see it, because this guy is a genius. I mean, he's able to do this in one sentence. He's able to say one thing and then counter it in the same sentence, because it goes like this. I translate: the West intelligence was so incompetent, they failed so much that they haven't seen the utter incompetence of the other side. But it doesn't call the Western intelligence incompetent. It just calls the other side.
And yeah, even I'm shocked at how corrupt and incompetent the Russian military is. They can't do anything.
And the word corrupt, of course, because our intelligence is pristine.
When you actually get out a ruler and measure how far they've gone in the Donetsk Oblast, 24 kilometers, 2.5 years of fighting, hundreds of thousands of people dead, and the Russian military has advanced 24 kilometers.
As this guy knows what he's talking about. I think he knows, but he's doing this on purpose. He's a propagandist. So we all know how Russia just, in very short time, remember this, in very short time, with a very understaffed army, captured 20% of Ukraine in a spectacular movement of operations. Do you think an utter corrupt and incompetent army could have done this? I mean, I can give it easy if you tell me that the Russians were not expecting the war to go on. They would expect to bring Ukrainians to the negotiation table and end it early on. I think they were expecting that, yes. And so what happened next was they really had to shape their tactics and do a lot of changes. But they did it anyway. They did it, and they adjusted, and they keep 20%. And in this particular case, notice that this guy is only mentioning how much they advanced in the Donetsk Oblast. The Donetsk Oblast is a front line since 2014. It's a front line that has been fortified prior to the initiation of this invasion during 8 years. 8 years of fortifications and clashes, by the way. Artillery duels, shelling the city of Donetsk. He fails to mention that. He does mention hundreds of thousands of dead. Well, dozens of thousands of dead were only civilians from the Donetsk Oblast.
Towards their objective of taking the entirety of the Donetsk Oblast. I don't know how anyone can look at those basic facts and not be shocked at how...
You see, that's what he's doing. Basic facts. But he's ignoring other basic facts. Fucking 20% of the territory. I don't know.
Bizarre this is. Like,
bizarre.
Nobody could have predicted this outcome, that Ukraine would have performed so well defending their land, defending their people, 2.5
getting
years
slaughtered.
ago. So I think people are still making the same mistake. They're still constantly overestimating the Russians and not just looking at the facts today of how poorly they performed and then said, well, Russia's not going to do better in the future. I mean, if with every advantage they had going into this, they're still struggling today, I don't see how Russia's ever going to turn this around. So
let me give you another perspective. Russia has 140 million people. Europe alone has roughly 400 million, plus 360 million from the US. Russia is fighting against a huge coalition of a war-trained coalition. I mean, look at who has been doing the bulk of the wars since World War II, for example. And Russia alone is fighting this coalition in a front of 1,000 kilometers wide. When was the last time the US did that? You can write in the comments if you made it to this part of the video.
Let's give Ukraine everything they need to win this war today.
I think it's quite interesting because there are these sort of two opposing views of Russia, or specifically the Russian military, that you've hinted at, and that on one hand, we sort of tend to see it as this, or sometimes tend to see it as this unstoppable war machine. And on the other hand, sometimes we tend to see Russian military as like a bunch of bumbling idiots.
I mean, this guy just said it. He just exposed the other guy's propaganda. Which one is it? Is it a bunch of mumbling idiots, or unstoppable war machine? You gotta decide, man.
We're completely incompetent, and it seems to me like you would probably lean more towards the latter view. But I would say, and I've heard it from quite a lot of senior Russia experts and analysts, that there's a danger of underestimating Russia, and perhaps that sometimes might lead to a complacency in how we treat the whole issue.
And that actually happened on the battlefield, and it costs dozens of thousands of Ukrainian lives, wasted for nothing. That they keep talking about Russia doing meat assaults, human waves. They keep trying to project this old image of the Soviet Union in World War II, which is I mean, if you, of course, I know you have to go through many blogs, talk to many people. You have to get informed to see that it is not like that. But they keep trying to pass this image, which is far, 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 far away from reality. But this guy's question now, he nailed it. Of course, the other guy is inclined to the latter. But we never know when he's gonna change, when he's gonna contradict himself in the same sentence.
We see Russians as incompetent. We tend to expect that winning the war will be easy, and that sometimes leads to not giving Ukraine the support that they would need?
Well, when
Sorry for stopping now. It's not giving Ukraine the support they do. They're giving it the support. I mean, look at. I just mentioned the offensive. Of course, they are underestimated Russia. Just go. I advise you to go to interviews with General Ben Hodges. I'm sure if you follow pro-Ukrainian propaganda, you know who it is. Follow General Ben Hodges and go back to before the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the south. The counteroffensive that was about to sweep through the Black until reaching the Black Sea. This same counteroffensive, and it would put all the Russian lines and people in disarray and complete disarray. That's the one. Go and see what he said before that counteroffensive, and then compare it with the information and the knowledge that we have now.
giving forecasts, you give two different kinds of forecasts into the future. There's the forecast of what if we do nothing and we don't help Ukraine. That's the doomsday scenario. Russian tanks go all the way to Portugal. If Russia can take over Ukraine, mobilize the men, absorb their resources, yeah, Putin's going for the Baltics next.
You see how fast he contradicted himself. So the guy was inclined to the opinion that the Russian army was utter incompetent, completely corrupt, completely unable. And now, if we don't help the Ukrainians, they go all the way to Portugal? You mean like they're gonna roll over to the Balkans, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, reaching all the way the Atlantic, entering Lisbon in triumph if we don't stop them in Ukraine, the disorganized, incompetent army that Russia is? The nation of 140 million against this coalition of almost a billion? I mean, it's amazing how this guy, with very, I mean, look into the guy's eyes. I mean, this guy would be a good salesman. I think also a good preacher. I think this guy has. I mean, he would start a cult or any religion. He would be successful. Just look into your eyes, and my son, look in this and that. This kind of music.
That's the forecast if we do nothing. But the forecast of if we help Ukraine, we send in trainers and expertise and give them the weapons, then Russia can't win. Russia's never going to win this war. So I do both. I give both forecasts. The doomsday scenarios of Russia achieving all of their wildest dream objectives, reconstituting the Russian Empire, the United States retreats across the Atlantic, the Russians get to take control of all of Europe, which is what Joseph Stalin wanted to do after World War II.
Where did he get this? Joseph Stalin wanted to do what after World War II? I mean, you have to be honest here, right? And it's simply not true. Where does he get this information? He doesn't say it, right? It just tells you lies, and it just just tells you, plays you this music, and then it speaks with the conviction that it seems true, but it is not.
And yeah, there's the other scenario of Russia's beatable. Russia is entirely beatable. We're just the dramatic change on the battlefield over the last 2 months since the United States Congress passed the 61 billion supplemental. I mean, the Russians took Avdiivka. The Russians were having this salient breakthrough near Ocheretny. Everybody was saying the Ukrainians are doomed. And all we did was give them some extra artillery shells and Gimler's rounds, and the Russians haven't advanced anywhere on the map in almost a month.
Which is not true. So this guy not only lies blatantly, with very big conviction. Russia has been advancing ever since the capture of Avdiivka, right? Just go, I don't know, follow Dima. If you don't believe Dima, there are plenty of mappers there. Even pro-Ukrainian mappers admit it. Just, if you are an utter moron and you only listen to one side, and in this case, just guys like this one, like this Broe, You go to deep deep state UA maps and follow there. I mean, you not have 100% the truth, but you can see that this guy, this guy is saying is a lie. It's a lie. And look at him. He said, "I give both scenarios." What is this? You can't give both scenarios. It's like it's the same as going to a race, and you can choose. Like you can bet on a player, something like this, but you choose to bet in all players. You're not. What is that? It's nothing. You can't do that. You can't give both scenarios. It's just bullshitting people.
Russia's beatable. Let's do it.
What's your view?
Russia's beatable. Let's do it. You see, this is the very dangerous message. This is a very, very, very dangerous message. And these people just they will lead you to death with a smile. I mean, that's what this guy was trained for. To sit there in the bunker with his
View of the situation.
Let's do it.
What's your view of the situation at the moment? Because you've hinted at it, but basically, if you can give me your sort of high level assessment or analysis, looking at basically what we now see as the failed Kharkiv offensive. How do you see the balance of power between the two sides as it has been for the past few weeks, and maybe your forecast into the coming months?
I think both Ukraine and Russia have accepted this is a war of attrition, and they're only going to win the war through their own definition of winning if the other side can politically and economically collapse.
Okay, before we go into this collapse, this theory of collapse, the question was already rigged. With this guy questioning, making the statement that this offensive near the Kharkov region it has failed. It has not failed. It is first of all, it's still undergoing, but it has not failed. And the objective was not to capture the city of Kharkov itself, or Kharkiv, as you wish, itself. And you simply do the math. You simply see the number of troops that they have there in place to do it, and you tell me if that's an operation to take the second largest city in Ukraine. I mean, but it's convenient. I mean, somehow I can understand this. It's convenient to say that you failed, right? If you stop, it's like that everything that you do can be by a propagandist, by a propaganda master like this guy. Well, can be used against you in propaganda. Aha, you stopped. And he completely. The problem with this propaganda is that it's completely detached from the reality on the ground, from the reality of the front lines. And this war is not an easy one. And this guy is just laying out this message that, oh, Russia's beatable, let's do it. Like a football match or something like this. 1,000-kilometer wide front line, where hundreds of thousands of people have already died, mostly soldiers, of course. And this guy just, let's do it. Like it's just like that. They're going to bleed Ukraine. People like this are the death of Ukraine. It doesn't matter if he hangs the Ukrainian flag on his bedroom while he makes these videos and cheering for Ukraine. This guy represents the death and destruction of the nation of Ukraine.
So Russia is going after Ukraine's thermal power plants. They're trying to send Ukraine back to the dark ages. And Ukraine is going after Russia's oil refining industry, go after their money supply. I saw this headline on Twitter the other day, but the price of potatoes in Russia has gone up 46% year to date. So just in the last 6 months, potatoes in Russia have gone up 46%. So Russia.
Look, See, this is the kind of information. It kind of annoys me because it's easy to see through, but for what I can see, it actually works with a lot of people. I'm not smarter than the next guy, but I mean, this is potatoes. When you talk about potatoes, tomatoes, cereals, whatever, things that grow, there are so many variables that can change the price from year to year. Most of these variables depend on the crop itself, and of course the markets, internal market of Russia. It's supply and demand, and if you have less potatoes for some reason, the reasons can be many. It can be a bad crop. It can be you're not importing as much potatoes if you need to, which I doubt that Russia imports potatoes, but it can be many things. The price fluctuates, changes a lot, um, can change a lot from year to year. Or you can have, for example, an increase in the energy prices. Like, for example, this guy it's okay. Let me lay it out more simply, because my English doesn't help me. This guy is using potatoes to say that there is a sign of somehow the Russian economy crumbling. I'll give you a number. I live in Portugal, right? It's like the safest place in the European Union. The price of olive oil itself has gone up just in few months 70%. Olive oil, it's considered a basic need product. It's widely consumed in the Portuguese diet. The bread has gone over 100%. So what you gonna say? We are going to collapse here too, as well? I mean, because based on your logic, that's what's going to happen. See, this is insane. It's fun at the same time.
Russians feel it at the grocery store.
I feel it at the grocery store. When I was in Russia, and this was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when I was in Russia, I mean, I could see that some prices would be quite steep for Russians, but those were mainly imported products. If you go eat vegetables and you do this kind of healthy Russian diet, I mean, it's like half or less than half of the price many times here, and you don't see people. I mean, they have problems over there. That's obvious. Every country has. But if you compare the diet of a Russian, if you wanna study the Russian economy, buy the grocery store. Go to the United States and see what these people on food stamps eat, the crap they eat, the shit they have available to eat, and what would they have to expend to eat properly. So this is no measure, and there is no struggle to get groceries in Russia. Okay.
My high-level assessment of how does Ukraine win, how does this war end, and it'll end when Russians can no longer, on their salary, go to the grocery store and even buy food. The economic situation is so bad, inflation is so bad. We're not there yet. And I'm going to give you the analysis that nobody wanted to admit 2.5 years ago. But Russia is only going to lose this war when they run out of money. And 2.5 years ago, Russia had a wealth fund. Putin had saved up money to fight this war, $600 billion worth. Half was frozen in Western banks because Putin's an idiot. He didn't tell his advisors he was going to do this. So you look at 300 billion and 2.5.
He was an idiot because he trusted the West. He trusted this neoliberal system where your capital is supposed to be safe. So you're giving out, I mean, it's too many signs this guy gives out.
2.5 years ago, people were saying, that's a lot of money. You know, a dollar goes farther in Russia based on what they pay for stuff. But now that we're 2.5 years into this war, how much of that 300 billion is left? Nobody really knows. Russia's central bank's not going to give us honest numbers. But Ukraine will win when there's an economic or political collapse inside of Russia. We don't know when that date will occur. but when it starts to happen, things are going to move very fast.
You see, this is the main message. With all this talk, this is the main message he wants to convey. And this main message has one purpose. Apart from, I'm not going into if it's true or not what he's saying. I think it's a load of crap. But this main message, he says, hang on there, EU and US taxpayers. Hang on there, because this is going to happen. You just need to be patient. You just need to shrink your paycheck more, pay much more interest rates on your mortgage. We the Europeans, at least as a Portuguese, we see the steep increase in the grocery store. And I think this is throughout all Europe. European economy, as you all know, it is the most suffering with all this ordeal, because it has severed itself. It has severed itself from its main reason for a robust economy, which was cheap energy from Russia. There was no ambitions from Russia to take over Europe. I mean, just look at the infrastructure they were building together with Germany. All these pipeline networks, to then invade and destroy? This makes no sense. This is childish arguments. This cooperation between European Union and Russia was only benefiting both Europe and Russia, and the US could not allow that. And we are seeing by the measures that the US takes, which go against European interests. You know that there are even taxes on imports from Europe imposed by the US, right? To the European industry. And then we got sold the expensive, shitty American natural gas as a replacement for the Russian gas. That Germany, still in Holland and other countries, had to build infrastructure to be able to receive this LNG, much more expensive. It's just crazy. While still receiving LNG from Russia, by the way.
Everybody's saying that Russia's never going to collapse. Russia can't collapse. Based on historical precedents, Russia is the most likely country in the world to collapse because they've done it twice in the last 100 years.
It is something that I always tend to say, and that's very much in line with what you say, and that basically every war that Russia has lost was lost because their economy has fallen apart in the middle of the war. And
look, these guys don't know what they're talking about. I mean, if you take, for example, the war of Chechnya, right? They have the first and the second one. Russia ended up winning this war. Not only won this war, as now Chechnya is one of the most faithful republics of the Federation, right? So quit the crap. Of course, you can give the example of the First World War and some previous wars before that, wars of the 19th century, the Crimean War, for example, against the British. But Russia has prevailed in the crucial moments of its history. Because, take for example, 1917, right? There was a revolution undergoing in Russia. The Tsar regime had delayed Russian progress for so long. Russia was a nation in tatters. At that time, we could say Russia was a nation in tatters. You had the Bolshevik Revolution. And what did that defeat represent in World War I? Nothing. They maintained the empire, the territorial integrity. It's negligible. Sorry, the kind of problems. It's not like the Russia scrambled after the First World War. No, after the First World War, it's starting to build the new Russia, the new Soviet Union, which made it a great power, which defeated, in the 1940s, defeated the Nazi Germany. I mean, what are these guys talking about? They want to pretend that Russia loses all the wars and it collapses all the time. They're going to talk about Afghanistan. But if they want to talk about Afghanistan, let them do it.
they've lost economically rather than militarily. But I guess the other side of that is that for Ukrainians, that basically means they just have to dig in and accept that the war might also go on for a very, very long
It's not
time.
just Ukrainians.
Russia is doing Ukraine a favor. You know, this stupid reinvasion of the Kharkiv Oblast, and they're taking 8-1 casualties. It would be so much more difficult for Ukraine.
Where did they get these numbers from? I guess maybe from the Kiev Independent, from the SBU. I mean, this guy. Okay.
To cause these casualties if Russia was just dug in and not doing anything. The fact that there are these meat assaults every day to try and take Chasiv Yar or to try and go farther into the Donetsk Oblast.
They keep it called meat assaults. From the beginning of this invasion, they've been saying that Russia's demoralized, Russia is not doing anything on the battlefield, Russia is doing human wave assaults. And when you see the casualties, because of course the numbers are arguable because both sides juggle with them, but the casualties are much higher in the Ukrainian side. And just take a look at the Ukrainian situation. They used to have people lining up to go to the war in the beginning. They are out of that. They admit it. It's not just me saying. It's admitted by the Western powers as well. They are swimming across rivers to dodge draft. Well, you see, Ukraine is in a much, much worse situation. This guy is just twisting the plot, making you believe that Russia it's going to collapse. It's just like it's doomed. It's going to collapse anyway. And so just pump the Ukrainians with weapons. They will beat them. And this mindset is the mindset that ultimately condemns the Ukrainian people to death, basically. They keep this spell of... They cast this spell and make people believe that this is like a movie, an American movie where the heroes triumph in the end. And the harsh reality tells otherwise. And I say it again, Ukraine, these guys are the grim reapers of Ukraine.
Russia is helping Ukraine with these stupid attacks and just losing equipments, losing soldiers. I know it feels endless at the moment because we're right in the middle of it, but Russia is going to have a breaking point at some point in the future and things will collapse fast.
So you think that actually...
Just hang on there. Hang on there. Just a little while that they will collapse. They were telling us from the very beginning in 2022. Just go back and read the old news and you see how much bullshit you have here. And then go and see the numbers of the Russian economy and compare it with the European economies, namely Germany.
Actually, in a way, the war of attrition, Russia, despite Russia having a lot more resources, in a way, is actually more beneficial for Ukraine.
The idea that we can just give Ukraine enough weapons where they can go on the offensive and retake all of their territory by force while Russia is still conscripting more men and, you know, their factories are pumping out artillery shells and tanks as fast as possible. In that scenario, that's horrendous.
You see, suddenly Russia is strong again. First, they are just wasting their men in meat assaults. Meat, it's like human waves, no technology involved, right? And suddenly, well, if we pump Ukraine with weapons, as you did last year, and Ukrainians did those meat assaults for you, I think that it's not going to work. So it's immediately contradicting himself.
The Ukrainian military. When we saw Ukraine, try and get through the Sorovikin line last summer,
yeah,
it's just too difficult with all these landmines and FPV drones and our precision artillery strikes.
I wonder how an incompetent army can manage all that in a 1,000-kilometer wide front.
for Ukraine to go on the offensive while Russia is still economically healthy and regenerating combat readiness every single day, I think that scenario still possible, but is less likely than Russia just having some kind of economic or political collapse back at home, and then their military doesn't want to do this anymore.
You see, this is wishful thinking. The reason Russia has been replenishing his losses effectively, it's because they have volunteers that keep volunteering for the front. They understand. They actually understand. They actually know history, and know very recent history. And they understand what's going on. And they know that danger is at their door. It's not at the US door. It's at their door. And so they have to prevail.
This war ends if someone just puts a bullet in Putin's brain, by the way. The second Putin is no longer living, we're going to find a way to end this war. I do think the elites of Moscow are not happy with the sanctions. Solovyov can't visit his 5 villas that he owns in Italy. They're not happy about paying higher taxes, and they want to find a way out of this if they can get rid of Putin.
Isn't
You see, there he goes again, painting the scenario of the dictator, which is suppressing everyone around him, and sooner or later he's going to get a bullet in the head. The guy doesn't understand shit what he's talking about. Or he understands, but he has this music that it's easy to make sense of when you don't know shit.
that, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate here, isn't that sort of the way of thinking we've had since the beginning of the war?
Exactly.
That we expect Russia to run out of money, or that the Russian elites or the regular people are gonna get fed up with what's going on. And we've expected that to happen much sooner, but it still didn't happen. And we might have to just wait a lot longer than we might think at this point.
Not only it did not happen, as the support for the president got much stronger because people are aware of the danger that comes from the West. And there you have a plain answer in the voting polls about what people think about their president. People that do not like this guy, being this guy, the president of the Russian Federation, they voted for him the same. Because they know he's the only one that can keep these things together. At least they feel this way, right? It's a complex. He's far from being a dictator. You're talking about the Russian Federation. It's a huge country with a lot of republics. They have their own local leaders. And the cohesion of these leaders is what keeps Russia together. Not like some dictatorship that they portray here. He's elected. Knock off the bullshit.
Forget who told me this. It might have been Vlad Vexler, but somebody told me at one point that the superpower of the Russian people is they suffer incredibly well.
Yeah.
They are willing to accept conditions and treatments that no other decent human being or civilization would accept.
You see what he's doing? Now he's degrading the Russian people. That's another aspect of the propaganda. This guy is the perfect package. He fits perfectly in the drawer of the playbook of the Western propaganda. Perfectly. Because now it's the Russian people. Somehow they handle more than any decent people, than any decent person. Because they are not decent. They are not even decent to rebel. They just take the shit and they keep going in that shit and dehumanizing your enemy. That's what he's doing.
So the threshold for suffering and pain by the Russians is extremely high. And that's not suffering and pain inflicted on them by their enemies. It's suffering and pain inflicted on them by their own governments, their own leadership. So yes, I think there were a lot of expectations 2.5 years ago. I'm guilty of it as well. We're going to kick some big Russian banks out of the SWIFT network. This is going to cause an economic calamity. Foreign investments all going to be pulled out. Russia will collapse within a month.
Everyone was sure of that. You see, he admits it. But it's still now, but now he says, okay, but now we need more time. Last time we were sure that was going to happen. All our experts, all our economist experts were sure that this was going to happen. It didn't. But now, this is the one. It's now.
I mean, I thought that going back 2.5 years.
Of course you did.
But we underestimated the threshold of what Russians are willing to tolerate, because it feels and sounds pretty intolerable when I watch these YouTube videos of Russians going to the grocery store, or Russians in their small town that doesn't, there's trash piled up everywhere and they don't have any basic government services. So
what the hell is he talking about? This is just too fun. And it's funnier now that I've been there like 6 months ago. And I really advise you. It's a really nice exercise, and you expose these lies beautifully, because this guy is inspired by other propaganda videos. I mean, I knew at the time that I was also interested if the sanctions were having impact before going there. And I saw these guys making videos going to a big mall, for example, a big shopping mall, visiting this mall at like, I mean, it was like Monday morning, 7 o'clock or something. Some schedule that it was closed still, or it was closed already. So you could see only a few cars there, and most of the shops were closed because it was the schedule. And then they go and filming around and say, see, this mall last year, it was bustling with activity. You see people everywhere. This parking lot was full of cars, and now it's just empty. I don't know where this country is going. Videos like this. Look, I visited several malls there. It's something to see. I can just say this to you. It's something to see. And the abundance in the grocery stores, it's something to see. And the quality, the taste of the food, of the ingredients that you buy there, of the vegetables, it's something to see and taste. And please take my word on this, because I've experienced it. And I've experienced it not only in Moscow. I've been in several towns. I went to Volgograd. I went to small towns. I went to Donetsk city, which is in the front lines. And I really, despite all the shit going on there, all the bombardments, all the victims, civilian victims made by Ukrainian bombardments, people still can have a good time there. And food, there's one thing that is not lacking there for sure. It's food. Food and fuel and pretty much everything else people have. Only water, because they cut the water and then the Russians had to reconnect the supply of the water. But it was already becoming better. So again, bullshit on the part of this guy.
yes, they have a high threshold for pain, but things are going to get worse. Things are going to get worse every single day. These utility disasters last winter were shocking for me. All these apartment blocks in Moscow without heat and electricity because pipes kept bursting. This winter's going to be worse.
You mean Texas? Oh, you see again, this guy is giving these examples. He gets a particular thing. Go to Moscow, man. Go to Moscow. Compare it to any, and I dare to say it now, safely, freely. Go there and compare it to any other main city, European or American, that you have visited. Just do that, and then come listen to this guy again and have a laugh.
Nothing in Russia is getting better, as Putin is spending all his money on tanks and bombs to just blow stuff up in Ukraine, which doesn't benefit the average Russian at all.
Looking at it in that perspective, one of the ways out that Vladimir Putin is probably hoping for is the victory of Donald Trump, which could be one of the only realistic solutions for him to get out of this war with something that looks like a victory.
There's 400 million people in Europe. If the United States completely withdrew or gave up, I still think Europe can defend itself. It'd be a lot easier if America helped the Europeans stop this Russian aggression, this resurgence of the Russians trying to regain control of Eastern Europe. But even if even if Trump wins and the United States abandons Ukraine, it's still not looking optimistic for the Russians, in my perspective.
What
You see this guy? Okay, I mean, it does his propaganda, so it's not gonna even. I mean, it could be a little bit smarter and maybe try to go a little bit more realistic. But what it just did now, it's utter nonsense. If the US would drop now the support, Ukraine would collapse immediately because Ukraine is connected to its own life support. It is true. The Ukrainians are suffering a heavy burden, avoidable heavy burden. This could have ended within the first weeks at the negotiation table. The Americans and the British prevented that. Ukraine is never going to repay this dozens of billions which are being injected there. And this guy says that the Europeans alone could take on Russia. First of all, Russia doesn't need to invade any country, and it does not want, and there is no proof of that. That's one of the worst lies told by this propaganda. Second of all, if Europe would decide all together, all the EU countries all together try to invade Russia, they wouldn't have support of the people. They hardly have it now. Look at the popularity of the leaders that support the war in Ukraine. You could see it in this last European Union elections. They're all falling. Macron, which has been the leading, it's been assuming a leading role in the fight against Russia. Look at his popularity. It just plunged. I mean,
what's your view on the Russian nuclear saber rattling, of which I think we've seen once again
that's a good one again. Yeah, the nuclear saber rattling.
Do you see, as someone who's actually worked in this field and in this branch of the military, do you see any realistic scenario in which Russia would actually seriously consider the use of their nuclear weapons?
According to Russian military doctrine, they can only use nuclear weapons if, the integrity of the state is being attacked or compromised.
Looked, he again, he started well. This is correct. He's citing the Russian military doctrine. This needs to be done more often. Bravely done, Jake. Because they in the TV you hear that Russia wants to nuke the West, like threatening with the nukes, and but it's not. It's responding to a threat. So let's see if Jake keeps his head together on this one.
And at the moment, Putin has made himself indistinguishable from the states. Putin has declared himself Tsar of Russia for life, and he is Russia. So Putin views it as, if I'm threatened, I will use nukes.
You see.
So I do believe that. I do believe that if Putin thinks there's a serious threat to his power, he would use nuclear weapons, but who's most likely to challenge him internally? And it's some other faction within Russia. So I think the most likely scenario of Russia using a nuclear weapon is against itself. It would, if somebody like Prigozhin, some warlord, was doing a thunder run to Moscow to take control of the Kremlin, Putin would nuke that convoy.
What are you talking about? You see what it's just? I mean, it's just spewed out words, a word salad. First of all, he started by citing the Russian nuclear doctrine. Very well done on this subject. But then it twists it in a way that, after all, Putin is Russia, so it's not the Russia that is threatened. If Putin feels threatened, he might use it, but at the same time, he would use it if he had some other faction rebelling against him, he would more easily use it against his own.
But as far as nuking a NATO city or using a nuke somewhere in Ukraine, there's no benefit. It doesn't help Russia achieve the victory in any capacity. So,
see, you see this? It just said it. It said that Vladimir Putin would rather more easily use a nuke on his own people than on the aggressor. This, I mean, I don't know where he gets this trend of thought. I don't know. I mean, this guy's it's rather funny, but it gets better on this one, on this topic, because now he wouldn't do it.
if Putin decided to use a nuclear weapon to destroy Odessa or destroy Kharkiv, would Ukraine surrender? I don't think Ukraine would surrender. Would support for Ukraine go up in response to the first nuclear attack being used in war since World War II? Yeah, I think support for Ukraine would go up.
Exactly. And now he touched a very important point, because not only it would go up, as it's my deep conviction. You can disagree, write it in the comments, call me names, whatever. It is my deep conviction that the escalation done by the West through Ukraine, because it's not Ukraine escalating, it's the West. The war is against the West. It's against NATO. It's against Washington, ultimately. And Brussels, which is a puppet of Washington. If it would escalate, it would be so handy, because the West is having difficulty in galvanizing people against the Russian cause. With all the propaganda, with all the efforts, all the money poured into this project, colossal amounts of resources and money, they can't manage to galvanize the people. Because one thing is if you ask an opinion poll of a propagandized person, sure, he will say bad things about Putin. But if you ask him if he wants to go there to the front lines, to the trenches, he will he will say no. So, and I feel that's the overwhelming majority in the West. So it would be very handy to test Putin's nerves, to drop maybe a nuclear tactical weapon. It would be very handy if that happened. For the West, this is dangerous waters we are swimming in.
I've made dedicated videos on this topic, but I'll give you the top 2 reasons why Russia can't use nuclear weapons. The first one is they don't know how the other nuclear powers would react, specifically India and China. China has explicitly told, President Xi has explicitly told Putin, do not use nuclear weapons under any scenario. So if China and India participate in sanctions, that's lights out for Russia. Putin knows that. The second reason why Putin would never use a nuclear weapon is he's dead if he does. He's going to have to pick his favorite command bunker underground, and he'll never be able to come back to the surface. Because if he comes back to the surface, a Hellfire missile will be waiting for him. The only reason why Western agents, Western intelligence is not trying to assassinate Putin is because they think he's a rational actor who will not use nuclear weapons. The second the guy in charge of Russia starts using nukes, there's no reason to keep him alive anymore.
Do you see the extent of this, what it just said? So actually, Mr. Putin, the threat of the world, the threat for the world, evil on earth, the devil on earth, whatever you want to call it, it's still alive only because the West is keeping him alive. What does this... I mean, this doesn't make any sense. But if you follow this logic, what does this tell about the West? If this would be true, let's make that hypothesis, go along this trend of thought. He's only alive because we think he is rational. but he's a dictator, he's a madman, he wants to take over the world. So which one is it? Again, you see the contradictions. This guy is the champion of the contradictions. How can you not see this? You can, I'm sure you can.
That's a cleanup scenario that we're trying to avoid. But Putin's alive, and he still gets to go on trips and parade around because he hasn't used a nuclear weapon.
So you think that if in the scenario that Russia would use a nuclear weapon, do you think that the US wouldn't actually have any other choice than to join the war on Ukraine's side?
If Russia used a single nuclear weapon somehow, NATO would get involved, but it would not respond with a nuclear weapon. It would use conventional forces to level Kaliningrad or sink the entire Black Sea fleet. Or, I mean, there's lots of kinetic responses that NATO would take, and honestly, they've had 2.5 years to think hard about it.
And in what? Level Kaliningrad. In what? Russia would just watch the West level Kaliningrad? It wouldn't do anything? What the hell are you talking about? What? Oh, you used a nuclear weapon. Now you're gonna get it. And Russia, please don't hurt me. What?
And prepare for what they would do. There is a plan somewhere, and it would not be good for Russia. So this is why the Russians have not used a nuclear weapon in 2.5 years, despite talking about it almost every single day on Kremlin state TV.
They talk about it on defense purposes. You yourself have cited the Doctrine. So quit this shit. You keep contradicting yourself and going around. And even when you give, even when you admit that Russia is right, you still twist it. You still manage to twist it and make them look bad.
I think I have to use the opportunity of having you here with your expertise, because there's this opinion that I sometimes read on Twitter about Russian nuclear weapons and how, given how incompetent the rest of the military is, there's a chance that most of the nuclear weapons wouldn't actually work anyway, because
they would be
just as hollowed out and corrupt as the rest of the Russian military. What's your view on that?
Given how incompetent they are, I don't know why NATO, which is so committed to this, hasn't beat them already.
I can speak from my own personal experience working in the missile fields here in the United States. When I would go on shifts in a launch control capsule, I had status monitoring of up to 50 nuclear silos. And every single shift I took, alert I went on, at one of those 50 silos, something broke. Maintenance is continuous. There's so many moving parts and stuff that needs to be lubricated and checked and maintained and filter swapped out or whatever. At these 50 silos, I couldn't go 24 hours without something breaking. So when I think about Russia's nuclear...
You see, it's I know what he wants to get, but he's risking this one is kind of risky, because he's admitting that the infrastructure of the nuclear weapons of the United States is crumbling, which I have heard about. It's quite secret, but they still use like this floppy disks from the 70s and the 80s. And it's an old infrastructure. It's an old infrastructure. And the United States have not been investing on that. They haven't been worried with that. They have been focusing on massacring ship herders and tearing out small governments abroad. So their infrastructure is indeed crumbling. And what this guy that worked there just said, it's just that. It's just that. But of course, he's going to twist it now.
Nuclear missile fields, or their road mobiles, or wherever they have their their missiles hidden, stuff breaks all the time. And I don't understand why they would prioritize that maintenance when they have soldiers dying in Ukraine. You know, if resources are finite, your attention is finite. Yeah, I imagine their nuclear forces, which aren't being used and can't be used, are being neglected. But what Russia makes up for in precision, they compensate with quantity. It doesn't matter if the failure rate on 6,000 nuclear...
What the hell? They have been renewing their nuclear strategic forces. They display them. They've been exercising them.
Weapons is 50%. They still have 3,000 functional nuclear weapons. So that's always been Russia's strategy. So we can't rely on them not working because they still have so many.
I think talking about Ukraine's theory of victory in the war of attrition and how the West can make it possible to happen. In recent weeks, Ukraine is probably going to get their first F-16s, and it has received permission from the United States and from European countries to finally start hitting Russian targets on the Russian territory. Do you think there's anything more, any substantial capability that NATO member states could or should give to Ukraine that we're still not doing?
There's always a wish list, a dream sheet. I mean, over the last 2.5 years, we've crossed so many things off that the West or the NATO alliance has said, no, we'll never send Leopard tanks. No, we'll never send Patriot air defense systems. No.
I love this guy. I just love this guy. I mean, he's just saying, he's just denouncing his own propaganda. It's nice.
We'll never send ATACMS. So, I mean, what's currently on the list? Like, what's on the wish list for people on Twitter to yell at our politicians? And it's Taurus cruise missiles from Germany. Germany says they don't want to send it because they would have to send advisors or operators to Ukraine for those Taurus cruise missiles to work. And just do it. I mean, maybe we got to get rid of Chancellor Scholz first, but just send the advisors or the operators so that Ukraine can start using Taurus cruise missiles.
Okay, not only did lay out his propaganda, saying all this, that the crossing these thresholds, these lines that we're not gonna send this, but we already sent it. We're not gonna send this one, but then we already sent it. As he spoke lightly of maybe we have to get rid of Scholz, of Chancellor Scholz. It's the position of the master talking about his vassal. Is vassal, not vessel, vassal. This is just, in this short sentence, he gave away the whole nature of the relations between Europe and the US. And they want to call this a democratic and free country. Just get rid of Scholz. That's what they do. They go and get rid of democratically elected, if they are not convenient to their own policy. I mean, do you want more evil than this? I don't know. It's a bit hard.
The other restriction people want lifted today is the use of ATACMS up to 300 kilometers into Russian territory. I don't know if President Biden is ever going to allow that, but I mean, that's, at this point, I don't think anything's off the table. We're sending NATO soldiers to Ukraine. That used to be a red line even 2 months ago. So, yeah, I think, I mean, if we're still a year from now where we are, Taurus cruise missiles will have been sent, within the next year. And ATACMS missiles will get the green light to be used up to 300 kilometers into Russian territory. What else is on the list? And I mean, we're not giving Ukraine submarines or I don't know. There's a lot of ordnance and missiles that can be fit to an F-16, and we've not had any discussions yet which ones are okay and which ones are not, because F-16s haven't arrived yet. But as soon as Ukraine is actually flying F-16s, everyone's going to get out the sheet of the dozens of different missile types that can fit under an F-16, and they're going to say, have we sent that? Why haven't we sent that? We know we got some of these. I don't care how far it goes, or can it be used on the territory of Russia? Give Ukraine, those AMRAAMs or whatever missile type can fit on an F-16. That's the next debate that's coming.
And you've mentioned another threshold, which would be the deployment of NATO troops in so far we're talking about non-combat capacity in Ukraine. Do you think that could be a game changer, or would it be? Will there be a moment when we're not going to even be talking about non-combat capacities, because that still has a limited impact, and we would be talking about sending NATO troops that would directly participate in combat?
I think this was just said 2 weeks ago that if for some reason Russia were to experience a significant breakthrough on the front lines, Poland said they would just go into Ukraine. I'm personally in favor of Poland just doing this now. I mean, if the people of Poland actually believe a war with Russia is inevitable,
They don't. It's a government thing. But anyway, I think, okay, just
then you might as well fight it now on Ukraine's territory and not your own territory. So I do think that NATO combat forces at some point in the future probably will enter the war to fight only on the territory of Ukraine. I know that's hard to imagine now, but if for some reason
it's hard to imagine because it's World War III. That's what. Do you know what this guy's saying lightly? Just send troops there. Just let NATO go in there. They're going to ask for it. I'm sure. I'm sure, because ultimately they want Russia to do the nuclear escalation. That's their wish. So they can get they can gear up for fully, which is not good for any of us. So you see who is doing harm to the world, who is threatening the world. This guy is a mirrors all that. The way he speaks lightly about these things, and he goes on talking about how we can and how we help and how Ukraine must be helped and all this, and you forget everything that goes on in the world, the massacres in Palestine, all the exploitation done by the US throughout the world, all the military bases it has, all the wars of aggression it has been doing, like Libya and Syria and Iraq, and it also fails when he tries to downgrade and talk shit about the Russian military. He also fails to acknowledge that the most powerful military in the world has been 20 years in Afghanistan. 20 years. 20 years. And they were defeated. And they were defeated in a way that the Russians were not in the 80s. I mean, they didn't even have time to leave. Do you think they are capable of fighting a broad frontline conventional war against Russia? I really don't. On their territory? I really don't think so. Ukrainians is a different matter. They have the perfect guinea pig for their experiments with the Ukrainians, because Ukrainians are very much like Russians. Even if you get offended by this sentence, they are. And they all speak Russian. They speak the same language. They are Slavic people. They are very determined people when they doing what they're doing, and that's why the war is kind of difficult, because Ukrainians fight well as the Russians. It's just Ukrainians are fighting for no cause. This could all have been settled in the beginning, and that's the ultimate truth. Okay, enough of this guy, and I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a rather long one. I don't know. Let me know if you like this format or not. Give me feedback so I can improve the content the best as I can. You know that I'm quite busy with job and working shifts and family and a lot of other responsibilities, but I'll do what I can. And if you give me some hints, I might accept them and do the thing. Okay, guys, don't forget to press the like button and follow this channel. And I hope I see you on the next one.